Okay, hello, my name's Ollie. I do these videos every week. It hasn't actually been a week since I did my last one, but it was kind of raining very heavily outside, and the rain is just softly hitting the window and it feels quite atmospheric. I've got my normal candle here and everything, so I thought I'm going to do it a bit early, save myself from doing it later on. There are a few things I want to talk about. I've actually written them down on like a little piece of paper just to keep me on track, because in these videos I find myself, and you probably find, whoever's watching this, I go very scatterbrained. I constantly lose my train of thought and I go into different topics because I've never really done anything like this before, really been open with anyone before. I found in my past I've always, with friends and all those, unless I'm drunk or just really in the mood for it, I can't express my proper emotions without making it into a joke or trying to add some twist of humour to it, because it's kind of a defence mechanism from getting too intimate and close with people and leaving myself vulnerable to get hurt. Even though I've had friends who have been with me I've had one friend that's been with me for 13 years. I've had a friend, most of my really close friend group has been with me for about 5-6 years. I know they're not going anywhere, in terms of my friendship. My friend actually is moving to Australia soon, but I still can't really be open, I find. There's just something inside me that stops me from being vulnerable with other people often, and I think it's it's rooted in a few things from my childhood and an event that happened about 1.5 years ago. Before that I was a little bit more open. Now I'm not really. It really, there's one or two or three people that I feel comfortable properly expressing myself with. Apart from that, I kind of put on a facade a lot of the time when it comes to my feelings, and I don't talk about them, shove them down, I joke about them, in a weird way that does help, but yeah, I can't really be open, and that's why I get really scatterbrained and why I've got this piece of paper to help me. It's been 3 minutes, I've talked about nothing. Okay. Having goals is important. Yeah, I wanted to talk about this. A lot of people I see or I talk to, I just kind of get the impression they don't have anything they're working towards, really. They don't have a hobby or an end goal in mind. I've actually got a book with short-term goals, mid-term goals, long-term goals all written out, because without goals there isn't really anything, I'm not going to say anything to live for, but there's no motivation, there's no drive. A few of my goals, for example, short-term goals, I want to bench 90 kilograms in the next 2-3 months. I'm at 80-85 PB, and I'm confident if I eat in a calorie surplus. Yeah, I've got cheesecake waiting for me after I've done this video, and I track all my things, I progressively overload. I'm sure I can get there, and it's the knowledge of me making my goals specific that motivates me, that makes me want to do it. Another reason is for approval, and that is going to be the next topic I get on. I'll quickly go blend into it a bit now. I can be narcissistic in a way with my goals, because even if it isn't the primary focus of my goals, it is always a secondary that I want people to think highly of me because of what I'm doing. it's not all for me, even though I know it should be, but I know it won't ever be all for me. Ever. Because I'm shallow. I'm a shallow person. I want people to like me. I want people to kind of respect me in a way. And I feel like having accomplishments is just the easiest way to do it. There isn't really another way to do it. That isn't the same with all my goals per se. For example, long-term goals, like I want to live in the countryside. I want to be able to be self-sustainable, you know, like grow my own food. I want to have chickens. We might even get chickens here. My mum's thinking about it, and then it's the job to convince my dad. I want to have livestock and be able to get my food myself, because what happens in an event where I know you suddenly can't go places, like shops aren't open, where are you gonna get your Cocoa Puffs? Where are you gonna get your breakfast? You're not going to. You need to have things that you can rely on yourself for. You need to have goals that mean a lot to you and mean something to the world, like it'll be helpful. Not with all goals, but with a few of them. I find that's really important. But yeah, I find lots of people just kind of walking through life and not having any goals, and in a way I understand, because like life, you know, don't take it too serious. It's all about having fun, you know, making memories. Everything goes away in the end. But it's a competition in actuality. It is a competition, and for competitions you have to progress. You have to. So people who don't have goals, I find it often quite nihilistic. They're like, oh, everything's meaningless, you know, why should I have goals? I shouldn't take any responsibility. And I was listening to someone talk about this. Nihilistics, or people who believe in nihilism, believe that the world is pointless. Responsibility is pointless. Therefore, there's a positive and a negative to it. So the positive, if nothing has meaning, then why should you do anything? You don't have to take responsibility for anything because it doesn't have meaning. So it kind of lets you live more carefree in a way. But the negative is you can't take responsibility for anything you do or others do. And humans like responsibility. It makes them feel important. It makes them feel like they're worth something, because if someone is entrusting their responsibility to you, they have to think highly of you. And in a way it kind of links back to the seeking approval part. If they give you responsibility, they approve of you, they think you're up for the task. It's rooted in our neurochemistry. You know, in the caveman times, those who took lots of responsibility were very respected. I'm not speaking from experience, obviously, but it's been found again and again and again. I've often found, especially when I was younger, I couldn't really get approval from the people around me. For example, like I remember this one time, I was just devoid of all human contact. My family is really not a touchy family. You know, we're not very focused on feelings, and even if we were, I wouldn't be able to express myself properly, because I sometimes feel a bit, you know, odd one out type of stuff. But I purposefully fell on the floor in front of someone just to have the physical contact of them touching me and like making sure I was okay and, you know, helping me up. Now that I think back on it, it's really, really awful that I even had to do that, because I didn't get approval, I didn't get physical touch, I was very isolated. You know, I had a brother, we didn't get along at that time. We get along now. Just when I was, you know, 7 or 8, it was a bit later, like 9 or 10, and he was, you know, about 7. We hated each other, we fought all the time, and I was just kind of a bit lost, even though at 10 you don't really know what you're doing a lot of the time, but I could tell I was struggling with things, and I only found that I really got attention and respect from people when I was either helping them or I improved myself a lot. For example, before I went to the gym, I didn't ever get any attention from like boys or girls because I was just a skinny, weedy little kid, you know, who didn't have anything going for him. Then when I like developed some muscle and, you know, like some thickness, I found people treated me really differently. So that's also a bit of a motivation. I guess one of my goals is to have people like me, and that might be the overarching goal in my life, which it shouldn't be, but I think it is. I think it's a big one. But I think even that goal is better than having no goals, because having no goals, it just kind of makes you crazy. You don't have anything to live for, in a way. You don't have anything to do. You got nothing you want to accomplish. No one will like you. You know, if you're just going out, doing stuff aimlessly, you know, just partying every single night, like just trying to kill time in the day. There are times and places for it. There are definitely it's definitely a benefit having just a day in the week to chill out, to relax, to unwind. But you have to be doing shit. You have to, because otherwise you do nothing. What's the fun in doing nothing? Apart from, you know, just flooding your dopamine sensors in your brain, overloading them, making them more numbed, so eventually you actually become worse, you know, have to do a full detox and everything. Where was I? I don't even know where I was. But yeah, I think one of my main goals is seeking approval, even though it shouldn't be. I've got lots of goals, I've got them all written down, but that's my ultimate one. And I really hope that changes someday, because my goals change probably monthly, apart from like the really, really, you know, long-term ones. They change very often, and I'm hoping I get to a spot where I can say, okay, I don't seek approval anymore, I don't care anymore, I'm done. Like, I really hope I reach that spot. I wrote down one more thing on my piece of paper. Consumerism, always wanting more. I feel like this is becoming very apparent, and it's also being beaten to the ground in, you know, like short clips I've seen. It doesn't make you happier. It doesn't. I had phases where, you know, I would just constantly want new things. You know, I'd buy clothes to fit in. Nothing was ever good enough. I always needed something else. And I read this book called the courage to be disliked, and it made me realise that you have to be happy with yourself, and no amount of buying, lavish things, luxurious things, just amalgamations of unnecessary objects will change your image of yourself. It may make others like you more. So in a sense, you get more approval, you feel better about yourself. But that's short term. What's long term is changing as a person, I think, and you can't buy that. I think a good example, again, is going to the gym, because whilst you change physically, you get more approval. I found that you change mentally as well. I don't really go to the gym for appearance anymore. I go partly just to get stronger. Like, I'm not focused on high reps, I'm focused on low reps, high intensity, trying to minimize my fatigue as well as get some good weight in. But I also go because it makes me feel relaxed, it makes me feel sore, it makes me feel good. When I'm sore, I feel good, like really good. And I always have a hard time explaining that to people. They think like, how when you're sore does your body feel more relaxed? It's because you put in hard work towards a goal. If you're in the gym, you're working towards a goal. Nobody goes into the gym just like, oh, I'm going to do nothing. Nobody does that at all. It doesn't happen. But I've just found the gym really helps me mentally with calming myself. And whenever I'm in the gym, I always put in hard work, and it makes me feel better. It makes me feel sore, it makes me feel good, it makes me feel like I've done something. And that is the only way I can sleep, is if I can tell myself at the end of the day, okay, that was a day worth having. You've done something good. Either you've done something fun, you've done something productive, you've done something that made the day worth living, is the best way I can put it. Yeah, that's probably all I want to talk about. I'm going to save the rest of my list for next week. Well, I basically said all my list, but yeah. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you again next week.